Right, so let's crack on with the teaching points. Last week we did a little bit about the T model, TEA, which I've got the diagram on the wall today. So hopefully most of you will remember that. Quite a simple acronym. T standing for thoughts and beliefs, kind of the cerebral cognitive stuff that often gets in the way and is a big cause of both anxiety and depression, although two different thinking patterns. The emotional state and our feelings that thoughts lead to, and it's kind of this path. Thoughts will lead to positive or negative emotional states, which then affect our actions and our behaviour. And behaviour can include breathing, posture. But it is a web, and it is each feeds into the other. So likewise, we can learn techniques mainly through the likes of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, therapeutic sort of process to change. We can change like that our emotional state. We can learn techniques. We're not going to be doing them on this course, but we can. It's possible to change our emotional state. So when we can change our emotional state, that will change our thinking. When we can change our actions and our behaviours, and we were talking about if we can change our breathing to be a more productive breathing pattern, it can change the way we think. So we can affect change at all 3 points of these components of our existence, which is the good news, because that can speed up the whole process and give us our power back. And we talked about 2 minds last week. Do you remember that? The cat's brain in your tummy and this thing. So we have the body mind, that the enteric nervous system in the gut and the heart are 2 brains in their own right. But this is the one that often runs the shop, this grey matter, cerebral, cognitive mind. So certainly this often limits us. And when we're in that very busy thinking mode or the more depressive thinking mode, certainly in the busy thinking mode, we're in more of the left brain. So we're very much in our heads. So it's a process of kind of accessing the body brain so that we can become more of who we can be, so that we're not limited by this. That's what we talked about last week. And if we're talking about actions and behaviour, breathing can change the way we think. And this is a physiological and a chemical and a nervous system thing. So let's all just get into, because we're going to be doing some work on the T today. Most of you have had a quick skim read of your handouts, thinking errors, thinking skills. So we're going to be looking at very much at the T. But for T to be effective, for our thinking and our cognitive function to be effective, we have to recorrect some of the things that anxiety and depression make less effective. So, anxiety can really screw up our thinking and our cognitive function. It can really get in the way. It can really make us think a lot less effectively because we're anxious. And depression is very much stuck in a negative way of thinking. So breathing can at least begin to open up a more productive cognitive function. So before we do and learn about thinking errors, thinking skills, we're going to do a bit of coherent breathing. So if you can get comfortable in your chairs, and these chairs are quite good depending on our feet and our height, but just have your feet as flat on the floor as you can get them. Have your legs a little way apart because that enables you to really feel your seat bones. Feel the seat bones, and the backs are nice and straight, so you can have your back supported by the back of the chair, that's fine. And just have the hands resting somewhere on the knees or on the thighs or just in the lap. And sit up nice and tall with the head lightly balanced on the spine, on the neck. And you can have your eyes either kind of just softly gazing at your nose tip or just softly gazing beyond that at the floor. So the eyes are slightly down, but ahead of you. Or you can even allow your eyes to close during this process. And take your awareness to the contact of the feet on the floor, the soles of the feet in full contact with the floor. Feel the back of the thighs in contact with the chair and the seat bones. Feel the feet and the legs strong and supported by the floor in the chair. Feel that support beneath you as you feel the weight of the feet on the floor and the weight of the body in the chair. Allow yourself to surrender to that support. And feel your spine rising from the seat bones and pelvis. The spine nice and tall, rising upwards, almost an upwards lifting up of energy through the spine to the top of the head. And the crown of the head is if there's a puppet string attached right to the top back of the head, gently, gently pulling you up so that the spine is upright and the energy is moving upwards towards the ceiling. And whether your eyes are closed or just softly gazing, just feel the eyes relaxed and feel the jaw relaxed. And bring your awareness to your breath. Just become aware of the breath in the body. And for those of you who are a little bit newer to this, you may want to just bring your hands and place them on your lower abdomen, just below the navel. Just place them there, just in full contact with the body, so that you can feel any movements, no matter how slight. And allow the shoulders and the arms to relax and release. Just really allow the shoulders to hang off the shoulder girdle and the arms to just drop lightly down by the sides of the body. And make your belly soft. Breathing in and out through the nostrils as we do in yoga. Now you can begin taking the breath deeper into the body. Perhaps a little bit deeper than normal. You may already be there. So that as you breathe in, you can feel the abdomen pushing out and the hands expanding forwards a little bit. And as you breathe out, the belly drops back and down. Feeling most, or a part of the movement at least, in the belly. Raising the hands a little bit higher if you need to, if it's too low. So breathing in, you feel the belly expand like a balloon. When you breathe in, air is drawn into the body, so the belly expands like a balloon. As you breathe out, that balloon deflates. And now see if you can breathe in and count the breath. So you're controlling the breath a little bit now. We're going to try and see if we can lengthen the breath. Keeping the in-breath and the out-breath of exactly the same length. There's no pauses in between either. See if you can breathe in for a count of 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And out for a count of 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. With those little spaces in between, because we're looking at second lengths. If 4 is too much, try 3. So whichever count you're at, 3 or 4, just being very mindful of this, of the counting, of the breathing, of the subtle expansion of your abdomen. And then letting the hands drop softly back into the lap. Letting go of the practice, returning to a normal breath, which may already be lengthened. And when you're ready, taking your time, just come back to awareness and open your eyes. Changes things, doesn't it? Do we notice that? That feeling of feeling centered, of feeling grounded, which I think it was week 1 exercise, to kind of write down what that meant for you. Just feeling more present, feeling more here and now. And basically, it balances the nervous system. It balances the two sides of the brain, the left side and the right side. So it makes our cognitive function much more powerful. So we're ready to take things in more. We're ready to think a bit more clearly. So I'm going to be teaching you a little bit of, it's kind of drawing on cognitive behavioural therapy, really. Has anybody heard of that? CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, yeah. So I've done a little bit of training in that. And so this is kind of drawn from that, really. So on your handout, one of your handouts is thinking errors. And then you've got thinking skills, and then there's a reverse side of that as well, which is still thinking skills. You've just got two lots of thinking skills. One's a summary, one's a bit more. So thinking errors, thinking skills. And then the other handout is the stress thought record. Okay, so we all have some or all or a good majority of these thinking errors. And instead of going through them one by one, because you can read these at your leisure, I think the best way for me to kind of teach you this is to give you an example from my life and to kind of talk you through, because what this stress thought record is for a specific example that's recently caused you some stress. So if on the thinking error sheet it says, think back to the last time you were moderately stressed. Not a big humdinger, not a 10 out of 10, because likelihood is you just go straight back into that, and we don't want that. So moderately stressed. And highlight the thinking errors that you recognise in yourself. So I'm going to do that exercise now with an example from my life, which was on Monday. Right, so the stress thought record is on the left-hand side. You list the thinking errors, or you list your thinking, and you identify them as which thinking errors they are. And then the opposite side gives you a chance to challenge that thinking and to come up with better ways of thinking. So what we're focusing on today is the left-hand side, and identifying the patterns that we have of thinking that are less than useful for us, that are less than resourceful. So the first skill in this is identifying less than resourceful thinking patterns that we have, that everybody has. And some of them will be stronger in us than others. We'll have just a habit tendency. So my example is, as I'm stepping back from it, but to do the psychotherapy and the therapy and stuff. I have a very small marketing business, a small public relations business. So I have a number of clients. And on Monday, we had to go in and do a presentation, a short presentation on a plan that we'd devised for this client. So, and this was in the background of, there's budgets being cut all over the place, not necessarily with this client, but across the sector. We had done one job that hadn't gone so well, and I was a bit nervous just doing the presentation in general, right? So that's the moderately stressful event. And the thinking that I noticed, and this is quite fascinating because I still have the errors, but I stop them in their tracks these days. So it's almost like, don't have an expectation that you will stop having the thinking errors, because it's just part of being human. But you learn to identify them really quickly and stop them in the tracks. So I had to think quite hard at this, because I stopped them in the tracks and changed them on the fly, really. So my first thinking error was, I can't even read my writing. The last job that we did wasn't very good, so we did a bad job. And I'd notice it in myself. I'd go through a pattern of, I'm useless, I'm not very good at doing that, I'm useless. So I've done a not so good job, I'm useless. Okay, that's one of my thinking errors. So that's the first one that I noticed when I thought of this example. So that one is an example of the first one, or the second one actually, labelling. So we globally rate ourselves as useless as opposed to a specific behaviour as being not so good. So because I did that last job not so well, I'm useless. You know, I'm not very good at doing this. Instead of thinking, well, actually, that last job, the client hadn't prepared for it very well, the brief was very poor, I wasn't very motivated. It's one job out of hundreds that's been bad. Okay, but there is a tendency in me to say, that wasn't a very good job, aren't I useless? So that's kind of labelling. So that's an example there. The next thought that I noticed was, we're not very good at what we do. You know, this going through my head, focusing on the negative in the third one down. So instead of keeping the whole thing in perspective, and it was a tiny job as well, there's a tendency to just focus on what went wrong and just on the negative. Does anybody else recognise that? Yeah. So we're not very good at what we do. And all my mind's focusing on is that one job, and it was teeny, weeny, almost not very important job, but I was focusing on that. We're not very good at what we do. Going into that meeting with that belief running or that thought running, noticing it and changing it. And as I was doing this presentation, this particular client is quite a sort of stony-faced woman. You know, she doesn't give much away. She's she's very cold, closed, and she was sat there. Okay. And I'm giving this presentation for their plans to win the business for the year, you know. So I'm thinking, and I noticed this big time in myself, she's looking pissed off. What is she pissed off with me about? What have I done? She must be really unhappy with this presentation and with us. And that's mind reading. Penultimate one on the first page. Mind reading. That is inferring from that person's behaviour, the look on her face, I'm guessing, and then making that reality, what she's thinking. Was I don't have a clue what she's thinking. And actually, at the end of it, she was very happy with the presentation. Yeah, but if I'd have let that thought go on, I would have been in pieces at the end of the presentation. So I noticed it on the fly, and you know, I've got various techniques to do to block it a little bit, really. Yeah, is that making sense? The next one I noticed is, and this is how the thoughts cascade down, isn't it? So this is kind of real-time ticker tape stream of thoughts, cascading down into a downward spiral. Does anybody else notice that tendency of mind? Yeah, if we don't stop it in its tracks and say, thinking error, I'm going to change that. So I'm going to lose all this work and I'll have to fold the business. Right? And it did fly through my mind, and I stopped it. I stop it and I change it. I think, how ridiculous is that? So that's a fortune telling, the very last one down. We predict the worst case scenario, usually, most often, by insufficient evidence. And there's some more examples with each one of these. And then, of course, then, by the time you've spiraled down into that, oh, my business is going to crash and I need the money, then you're starting to feel really worried, right? So you're feeling like really bad. And then you think, well, I feel bad, this must be bad. You know, I'm feeling really bad about this, so there must be something really bad about this. We've kind of cascaded. And that's called emotional reasoning. So, you know, I'm feeling worried, there must be something to be really worried about here. Emotional reasoning, that's the second one down on the second page. We tend to, some of us, not all of us, and not all of us have all of these, some of these might not be making an effect on you, but we evaluate situations by how we feel, instead of staying objective and looking at it from a bit of a different perspective, from a bit of a separate objective rather than subjective perspective. Yeah. And then another one was, if we don't get these 6 days, because I was pitching for 6 days of business a month. If we don't get these 6 days of business, it will be the end of the business. If I don't get the 6 days, all 6 of them, it'll be the end of my business. Okay, and that might be an example of awfulizing, which is the first one on the second page. Magnification or awfulizing. So making a generalization about, I'm highly likely to get 4 days, I'm quite likely to get 6, and if I get 4, you know, that'll be fine as well. But instead of thinking logically, I'm just awfulizing into, and that will be the worst case situation. It will be awful if I don't get the 6 days. And then her tendency for, God, this is so tough, running a business is so tough, I can't cope anymore, I can't stand it. Anybody recognise that? And that one, I can't stand it-itis. You know, sometimes these things are called different things. In NLP, we call them deletions, generalizations, distortions. They've got different labels, but these are a bit easier to understand. So we tell ourselves that we can't stand it anymore. And if we keep telling ourselves that, of course, we won't be able to. But all we're doing is telling ourselves that we can't. And really, really it's not that bad. I'm not that stressed. It's not that difficult. And I've got things to do if things drop off. So really, I can stand it. But these thoughts start to cascade down. And then the other one, big time, was, and this is definitely a tendency I have, is because I was with somebody who works with me, and she'd forgot to put in something at the end, a tactical plan. It's like a summary of the overall plan. So I'm like, she forgot to put the tactical plan in, blinking it, she forgot to put the tactical plan in. I can't believe it, it's all her fault. Anybody recognise that? Kind of, it's all her fault, we're going to lose this because she forgot to put that. Stop it in its tracks, saying, hang on, and we say, oh, it's back at base and we'll send it to you. So blame is a big one. Blame, instead of taking personal responsibility, we blame others for problems that may have occurred. Now that is a thinking error. That is a way of protecting ourselves from feeling bad, projecting it onto the other person, and nevertheless it's a thinking error because it prevents us from taking some element of personal accountability. Part of it might have been her fault because she did forget, but I'd forgot to spot it and remind her, and so I'm partly to blame. And instead of just blaming her completely, I've got to take part of that accountability and responsibility because that's resilient thinking. Is that making sense? Yeah. So, in that presentation, my ticker-tape stream of thoughts were, our last job wasn't very good, I'm useless, we're not very good at what we do, are we? She's looking pissed off, she must be really unhappy with us. I'm going to lose all this work and I'll have to fold the business. And she forgot to put in the tactical plan, it's all her fault anyway. And right down into a pile of steaming mud on the floor if we're not careful. So it's spotting these things as they're happening. So, and you can read these at your leisure, because there are other examples. And what I want you to do as part of your homework, and it is in your homework, in your booklet, is to go through this yourself and practice it for a moderately stressful event. The last thing I'm going to do just very quickly, because I'm going to talk more about this next week, is the converse side of that. Because the first half of this work is spotting the thinking errors. Knowing what the thinking errors are and then being able to spot them in ourselves. And to be able to learn to do that, you have to write it down and make it a very overt cognitive thing. And you may find that difficult at first if you've never done anything like this before. So to spot, moderately stressful event, and like I did, okay, what was I thinking? I know I felt pretty bad, but what thinking was going on? So just the left-hand column for your homework. I'm just going to quickly tell you about the other column. So the thinking skills, for example, I'll just give you a couple of examples. So the last job we did wasn't very good, I'm useless. We need to challenge it. So helpful thinking patterns or challenging or thinking skills, yeah. So last job wasn't very good, I'm useless, and you've got these both on one page, by the way. So to challenge that, we need to look at some of these things. So on the thinking skills sheet, about halfway down, it says, am I totally condemning myself on the basis of one event? Hang on, yes, I am. And that event was pretty tiny as well. It wasn't the best job I did, it wasn't a failure. Most of it was the client's fault anyway, because they hadn't briefed me properly. I went along with it, that's my fault too, but it was one small job and it's not worth condemning myself completely based on that. Okay, so that's challenge that. And then the second thought, we're not very good at what we do. the fourth bullet point down on thinking skills, am I paying attention to the negative side? Yes, I am. All I'm looking at is the negative. And then she's looking pissed off. What have I done wrong? She must be very unhappy with what I'm presenting here. Second bullet point down, am I mind reading? Yes, I am. She might have all sorts of other stuff going on. She's generally very stone cold faced anyway, so there's nothing new here. So it's just how she is, and I'm reading stuff into it that I don't need to. Yeah. So that might mean once I spot that error and I challenge it, I can then start to think about better ways to think. So I haven't done a very good job. I've done one less good job, or one bad job. I'm useless. That might be, well, okay, we've done hundreds of really great jobs and the client's absolutely delighted with us. It doesn't even matter, really. The other one might be, we're not very good at what we do. Actually, I'm focusing on the negative here. No, not everybody can get everything right all the time, and there's loads of things that we do right. Look at all this coverage. Look at what I'm presenting to her in the work that we did. We're actually very good at what we do, so we can change the thinking. So the right-hand column then, we put down the more productive thoughts. But just for your homework, I just want you to take a couple of moderately stressful events and notice your thinking. You might find two things happen when you do that. You might find it's more difficult than you think, because quite a lot of the time we're not even aware of our thinking. We're just like, something happens and that cascade of negative thinking that we're not even aware of until we just feel like, I feel really terrible. I feel stressed or anxious or just really terrible. So quite often, the thinking is so automatic, negative automatic thoughts, that we're not aware of that cascade that I've just pointed out. So you might find it difficult, but bear with it and really try and think about what the thinking was. And another reaction that you might have is you might just start laughing out loud. Oh, for God's sake, I didn't realise that I'm doing this. And that's part of the process too, possibly. So that's your homework to do. And complete the workbook as well. There's some examples in the workbook there. But you've got your handouts to practice with as well. And you can either just draw them up on a blank piece of paper or photocopy them, can't you? And then the other thing I want you to read for your homework is this short paragraph about sankalpa. So a sankalpa is a very positive thought that you come up with that you would like to be true in your life. And you need to read the paragraph. And then you're going to have it's in your workbook?
Oh, right, in the workbook.
In your workbook, yeah. So it's in your workbook. Have a read of that, what a sankalpa is. I mean, even Google it if you want, and then have a go at writing down your initial sankalpa. So a sankalpa is a very positive thought that we plant in the practice called yoga nidra that is using the power of thoughts and beliefs to transform our life. So it's a very powerful thought, something like, I am becoming relaxed and content in all areas of my life. I will live to my full potential. So it's a positive thought that you would like to become true in your life, that you might feel that you're a million miles away from at the minute, but you're not saying I am, you're saying I will be. I will be. I will be this. I am becoming this. I will be this. I am becoming this. And we plant it in this very deep relaxation process called yoga nidra. And it plants into the body mind, the subconscious mind, which is the one that is running the shop behind the scenes anyway. So that's the power of thoughts and beliefs, to change our lives. Even the scientists know this now. There's a whole branch of science called Epigenetics, which ultimately is about how thoughts and beliefs change gene expression, change our genes, genetic activity. So negative ones to a negative effect, positive ones to a very positive, powerful, emotional well-being effect. We kind of know this intuitively, but the scientists have taken 2,000 years to find proof of it. Okay, so let's come down onto the mats.